I'd like to say good evening and welcome to Newport News Church of Christ. Happy to have everyone that's with us on this rainy evening. And I'm sure the rain is going to deter some from getting out. It's quite stormy out there, but we appreciate those of you who were able to brave the weather and to be with us tonight. And I look forward to those that are also online with us tonight as we study our lesson. Tonight, we're looking at we'll be looking at the text of Matthew 20, chapter 20, 17, verses 17 through 28, Mark chapter 10, 32 through 45, and also in Luke chapter 18 will be the three areas where we can find the material for this evening. So we'll find them in those passages. We're still dealing with our Lord as he's on his way back to Jerusalem, coming down. He had been in Perea during what we call his Perean ministry, and now we know he's on his way back to Jerusalem for his final return to Jerusalem, which will ultimately lead to his death on the cross and his and during the crucifixion. And so we're in these key, vital last days, last weeks of the life of Christ. As we look at our lesson this evening, one of the questions that we have kind of a little question that sets us up for our thinking, and that is where we look at the question and think about the idea of what is it you want to be when you grow up. I know many times as children we're asked that, and as we're in school, they keep asking you, what do you want to be, what do you want to do, trying to help you to hone in on what you're going to do with your life, what kind of education you're going to need, what will you need to pursue to try to, pursue those things that you thought about or dreamed about being when you're growing up. But this evening, we look at that question from physical sense, because a lot of us we've already kind of pursued what we're going to pursue in life, but we're looking at that spiritually, looking about what do we want to be when we grow up spiritually? What is the goal for us spiritually in our spiritual growth? What are our plans for growing up spiritually? Do we have plans for growing up spiritually? Do we have a spiritual plan? We have plans and goals for everything else in life. We sit down and write journals, and we have plans. You can purchase plans. If you're on different diet plans, keto diet, all these different things, there's a plan, there's a goal. You can get it. You can download stuff. People come and help people to be more successful in life, tell them what they have to do, what things they should be doing to be more successful. So we have all these other plans, but when it comes to spirituality and living a spiritual life and growing up spiritually, do we have a plan? Are we just in here just trying to go forward and do what we think we should do? So do we have a plan for growing up spiritually? What is it that we want to be? Are we working diligently to prepare what we want to be spiritually? And so that's kind of what we look at this evening. Several texts in the Bible talk about growth and talk about us growing up spiritually. So even though you personally may not have a plan, the scriptures talks about us having a plan, talking about us growing up spiritually, and the idea about our spiritual growth. We look in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 11 through 15. It talks about that. And some he gave apostles, and some prophets, and some evangelists, some pastors and teachers, for the perfecting of the saints, for the work of ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ, till we all come into the unity of the faith and the knowledge of the Son of God, unto a perfect man, unto a measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, that we henceforth be no more children tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the sleight of men and the cunning craftiness, whereby they lie in wait to deceive us. But speaking the truth in love, we may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. So Paul talks about us not being children anymore, tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine. We're growing up. Talks about the idea of us becoming complete till we all attain the unity of the knowledge and the faith, become complete, become perfected. And so we see that idea played out in scripture, especially emphasized in verse 13 and 14, 13 and 15 through 15. When we look about the idea of spiritual growth and growing up, In the scriptures, we talk about growth, we talk about maturity. So in the scriptures, talk about maturity. In Hebrews, meat, those that are mature enough, they're able to eat meat, they're able to eat and digest more weightier things. Those who are not able to eat meat are considered those that are on milk, still on the rudimentary thing. Now, milk is important. Peter says, like babes desire the sincere milk of the word that they may grow thereby. But eventually we need to grow up. Hebrew writer would tell us that we need to grow up and be mature so that we can be one that can have meat and deal with more weightier things and not be on milk. And by the time when you should be teachers, you still have one that needs to teach you the first principles. So that's maturity, growth, so that we won't be depending on the first principles. We won't be on milk. We'll be on meat. Paul said, I have many things to tell you, but you're carnal minded. You're not spiritual. So I can't tell you some of the things he told the Corinthians that I need to tell you because your mindset, you're not prepared. You're not mature enough to handle those things. So in the scriptures, it talks about us being mature, being able to handle the things in Christ and being able to handle what comes at us. And then maturity, we'll see maturity in the way that we live our lives. When we're mature, it'll be shown in the way we make decisions. It'll be shown in the way we react to things. When pressure comes on us and trials and tribulations comes, if we're still younger and rudimental in the faith, don't know the word, don't know the scriptures, we may tend to have certain reactions and tend to maybe become a little unhinged. But those of us who are mature don't get flustered, we don't get worried. Doesn't mean that we're not concerned, have some concern about things, but we're more settled because what? We know what God's word says. When things happen out here in this world, it's not that it doesn't bother us, it bothers us, but we ultimately know who's in control, and we can be calm and settled even in the midst of chaos out there in the world because we just have a maturity because we've been informed by the word of God. Jesus was approached in our text this evening by two individuals who made a request to sit by Jesus when he ascends on high. Christ's response surprised them and those listening. He told everyone what they needed to aspire to be when they grow up spiritually. So Jesus is going to let us know what we should aspire to when we grow up. Let's look first at Jesus talking about he's going to foretell of his death again, as he's done many other times, but again, as he's getting closer to the fulfillment of that mission, he's again trying to give his disciples an indication of what's getting ready to happen when he gets to Jerusalem. The disciples are just shocked that he wants to go to Jerusalem because they know how bad the religious leaders, how the Jews want to kill and destroy Jesus. So they're aware of that. They're aware of the danger, but they just quite don't understand the mission that Jesus is going to fulfill. So let's look at Mark 10, verse 32 through 34. And as you look at that, we look at the map again. Jesus is traveling. He's somewhere outside of Jericho, I believe on the other side of the Jordan River. And so near the path that those pilgrims years ago took when they came into the promised land, those pilgrims coming from Egypt, coming from exile, and they came across the stream, the fords in the stream of the Jordan River, and came across into conquer Jericho. So he's somewhere in that vicinity as he travels back down to Jerusalem, and you see Jerusalem on the map. So they're traveling up. They're on the way up. Jerusalem is up. Jerusalem sits on a hill. It's elevated. It's up. So you go up to Jerusalem, go back down to Galilee, up to Jerusalem, down to Bethany and those areas around. So Jerusalem is up. They're on the road up to Jerusalem. And so this is where Jesus is at. So Jesus going to foretell the disciples again about his death. Verse 32 through 34. And they were in the way going to Jerusalem, and Jesus went before them, and they were amazed. And as they followed, they were afraid. And he took again the 12 and began to tell them what things should happen unto him, saying, Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be delivered unto the chief priests and unto the scribes, and they shall condemn him to death, and shall deliver him to the Gentiles. And they shall mock him, and shall scourge him, and shall spit upon him, and shall kill him, and the third day he shall rise again. All right, so Jesus is traveling with the crowd, and as he reached a spot near Jericho, because our next story will be in Jericho, the healing of blind Bartimaeus. So Jesus is walking ahead. They were amazed. Now it looks like there's probably a couple groups here. There's Jesus, there's his 12, and then a group of others. Jesus had a group of others that accompanied him, other disciples that followed him. We know in the Galilean area, there were several women that were in that company that provided for the needs, maybe provided meals and cooked and did things to help take care of the disciples. So he's got a little entourage here as he's heading back to Jerusalem. And so Jesus is walking on ahead. He's up in front of them. Now, the amazement, what's the amazement from here? They were amazed. Why are they amazed? Why would the disciples be, some of them, they were amazed. It said there's two reactions, amazed, and then there was some that were afraid. So the amazement, why would people be amazed as Jesus headed? What did the disciples know about what's in Jerusalem? Not necessarily. All right, so they know that there are people there that want to hurt Jesus. So they're amazed. Why is Jesus walking so spryly and with authority and with purpose and walking on ahead? He's kind of like leading them, outpacing them, where the rest of them, they kind of drag his legs like, why is the Lord walking so fast? There are people down there want to hurt him. Why is he walking so fast? Seems like he would be a little pensive, maybe kind of, taking a step back, kind of taking his time. Jesus is walking on ahead. See, what's the difference here? What's Jesus' mindset? Huh? Jesus on a mission. He's on a mission. He's got something to do. This is not something that this is a foregone conclusion. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. So he knows it's going to happen. As in his mind, as if it's already happened. He's just having to go through it. So Jesus is on a mission. He's moving with purpose. He's moving with focus. He's moving. The other ones are thinking about, why is he walking so fast trying to get down to Jerusalem? Don't he know what's waiting on him down there? So they were amazed. There were those that were amazed. And then there were those who followed who were afraid. Now, see, like I said, there's these two groups. There's the disciples. They're amazed because they know that because the reason why they left Judea and left that area and went over into Perea is because they know that the Jews want to kill him. And then especially after he goes down to Bethany and after they heal Lazarus, and then they want to kill Jesus and Lazarus, so they get on out of Judea. We know that people will start to take notice of Jesus, so he gets on out, goes over to Perea to get out of Judea, goes on across the Jordan and stays over there for a while. Now he's heading back down. So the 12 are amazed, but then there's a group that were following behind those other disciples. They were afraid. All right. And so we look at the they and the those. Are they the same people? We think about what amazed them and what made them afraid. Why was Jesus in front? It's likely because they were getting closer to Jerusalem and they knew that Jesus was getting into some dangerous territory. There's people that are looking for him and he's getting into some dangerous territory. Maybe they're amazed at the confidence that Jesus displayed as he's walking on ahead, knowing that there's a dangerous situation, but yet and still he's walking on ahead. He's kind of leading them. He's kind of setting the pace. And so that's why he's out ahead, walking on ahead. They may have also been afraid of what might be coming of them, waiting, because if something dangerous is Jesus walking into danger, guess who else is walking into danger? The disciples. They're walking into danger too if they're going with the master. So those are just some things to think about as he's on the way, and and Mark is significant. Mark is what? The descriptive person. Mark gives you those little descriptions. They were amazed, they were afraid. So Mark gives us these little descriptive pointers that help us out. Jesus foretold of his death again. He added details here that he had not given them before, telling them how he would be handed over and killed. So he kind of gives them a little summary. Go back into the text saying, behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be delivered unto the chief priests. All right. He's going to the chief priest. He's going before the Sanhedrin. Who's the one that's coming out to get him? In the garden, Judas is going to kiss him. Who's out there to get him? Temple guards. These are the Sanhedrin's henchmen. They're the temple guards. They're the ones that were sent out there to get him. Peter will cut off one of their ears, one of the servants' ears. But yeah, it's the temple guards, the Sanhedrin. They're temple guards that are sent out, and they're going to bring him back to the Sanhedrin. So he'll be before the chief priest and the elders in the Sanhedrin. So he's going to be delivered unto the chief priest, and then unto the scribes, and after they get to doing their thing, and then of course to Herod, and then he's going to be, and they shall condemn him to death, and then they shall deliver him to the Gentiles. Who are the Gentiles? The Romans. So the Gentiles are representative of Romans. So Jesus, in this little statement, he's giving them a little synopsis. He's going to be taken up, delivered to the chief priest, betrayed, delivered. Delivered means what? Somebody's giving you up. Somebody's turning you in. Somebody's, helping them to take custody of you. So he's going to be delivered to the chief priest and then unto the scribes, and they shall condemn him, and then they shall deliver him to the Romans, to the Gentiles, which we know are the Romans. They shall mock him. The Romans, they take him, they're going to mock him and scourge him and put a crown upon his head and hail king, and scourge him. He's going to be scourged, whipped beyond recognition. They shall spit upon him, and then they're going to Golgotha and kill him. But the third day he shall rise again. They didn't really, they focused in on what? The death part. They didn't really focus in on the third day he'll rise again. So Jesus giving them a little synopsis of this is what's about to happen when we hit Jerusalem. And so he's added some details over to them that he has not delivered before. All right. But he did not stop at the death, though. He kept reminding them of the resurrection. He kept reminding them of the resurrection. Look at Luke 18 and 34. Look at Luke 18:34. Luke chapter 18, verse 34. And this is the apostles. And they understood none of these things, and this saying was hid from them, neither knew they the things which were spoken. So what Jesus is sharing this information, how much of this do the disciples catch? None. They don't get it. They know none of these things. These things were still couched, still hidden from them. They don't know none of these things. When are they going to get it? After his death? After his resurrection. After his death, what happens to everybody after the death? Them jokers in a room hidden out, because they said, they got him, guess what? They're coming to get us. So them guys were afraid. Them guys are all hiding out and somewhere. The women go to the grave. They had to come run and find them guys. Them guys didn't show up Sunday. The ladies did. So yeah, they don't get none of this. They don't. All this Luke says that they didn't get none of that. They didn't get none of that. And so the apostles still did not understand what Jesus is saying. The text saying that the meaning of this statement was hidden from them, maybe referring to their preconceptions that prevented them from understanding. However, it could be that God designed it for them not to understand. So they were preconceived what their preconceptions of his death. There was some good, there was the death, but there was a victory in there too. He said, and on the third day rise. Did they get that? Yeah, I'm going to be killed, but on the third day. They didn't get that. They didn't get that far. They stuck on the death. They stuck on the fact that he was gonna die. So they didn't get down. They didn't process that whole message. Yes, sir.
It's not until the second time you talk to a person, I told you, you said, I didn't know that's what you meant. I
Mhm.
get it, I can understand. So we understand it's human as well, and sir, it happens to us. So when you're thinking about this, sometimes we wonder, how could they not get it? Same way you don't get it when someone telling you something, the words are coming out of their mouth.
Mhm.
Sometimes you still don't understand until later. They explain to you again, oh, I thought you meant, I didn't get it, so we understand. It happens to us all the time.
Yes, sir. We talking to people, and then when they repeat back what they got, and you said, I said all of this, and this is what you got. You got this, you got stuck on one little thing, and I said all of this, and this is the only thing you got out of all that I said. So they didn't get, the disciples didn't get very much out of what Jesus said. So now, so that kind of sets us up. Now we're gonna look at James and John's request. Look at back at Mark chapter 10. Look at the request that James and John make, 10 verses 35 through 45. And James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came unto him, saying, Master, we would that thou shouldest do for us whatsoever we shall desire. And he said unto them, what would ye that I should do for you? They said unto him, grant us that we may sit one on thy right hand and the other on the left hand in thy glory. But Jesus said unto them, ye know not what ye ask. Can ye drink of the cup that I drink of, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? And they said unto him, we can. And Jesus said unto them, ye shall indeed drink of the cup that I drink of, and with the baptism that I am baptized with shall ye be baptized. But to sit on my right hand and on my left hand is not mine to give, but it shall be given to them for whom it is prepared. And when the 10 heard it, they began to be much displeased with James and John. And Jesus called them to him and said unto them, ye know that which are accounted to rule over the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and their great ones exercise authority upon them. But so shall it be not among you. But whosoever shall be great among you shall be your minister. And whosoever of you will be the chiefest shall be the servant of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many. A similar situation happened in Mark 9, 30 and 37, when Jesus foretold his death, and they wanted to know who was the greatest. And so we see the request here again. Matthew's account says their mother, Salome, made the request. Mark's account says James and John made the request. So maybe both made the request, or maybe James and John made the request to their mother. But we have the difference, the variances in the situation here from Matthew and Mark. It appears from their first statement, they wanted Jesus to respond by saying, sure, whatever you guys would like. But Jesus, knowing their heart in question, asked them what they wanted him to do for them, as we saw in Mark 10:35. They wanted to sit at his right and left hand in his glory. Now, why do you think they asked this question now? He had just talked to them about his death and resurrection once again. More so, he had just told them in Matthew chapter 20, verse 28, that one of their rewards in the kingdom would be sitting on 12 thrones. They may have thought that it meant that they would literally be sitting by Jesus in this great kingdom he was about to establish. So they they think they're asking to sit one on this side, one on the other side. Now, there's 12 of them. Why should those two get to sit next to Jesus? Just like if you're in a family with a bunch of kids, sometimes there's a good seat or a good place. And Brother Greg, you come from a big family with a lot of kids, a lot of jesting and wrestling over. You know, for us, it was who gonna ride. Like if we was in the car with one of the parents, you know, and we was old enough, well, back then they didn't really care. We sat wherever we wanted to. Everybody wanted to sit shotgun. Everybody wanted that passenger seat. Everybody wanted to be up front. Everybody fighting over to get that seat up front. You know, because you're up front, you got the view, the other ones is in the back, you know, you can maybe control the radio and mess with the heat and all that, Brother Chris. So everybody wants to sit shotgun. Everybody want to ride up front. So why did these two guys want to be next to Jesus in glory? Jesus already told them they're gonna all get thrones. Wasn't that good enough? You're gonna get a throne. Now, why do they gotta have the one right next to him, Brother Greg? Why they want to be right next to the Lord? Huh? They asked. So we think about what made them think that they could have this connection. They had a little money. Back Mark 1:20. Let me flip back over there. Mark chapter 1, verse 20. And straight away he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the ship with the hired servants and went after him. So they worked with his father Zebedee, who had a ship and hired servants. So obviously they maybe had a little money. They had a connection to the high priest. John chapter 18. Yes, sir. Yeah, they're thinking carnally. We just kind of get at why they thought they should sit. John 18 and verse 15. And Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. And that disciple was known unto the high priest and went in with Jesus unto the place, unto the palace of the high priest. So that was John. John was familiar with the high priest. So maybe because of their money, their daddy had a little money, maybe because John of his connection and was familiar with the high priest. They were in the inner circle, kind of James and John and Peter, Mount of Transfiguration and one of the healings. They were only three that got to go in. So they kind of Jesus' little inner circle. So maybe they thought because they was in the circle, they should maybe have a little extra something. Brother Greg? Yeah. They didn't call them the sons of thunder for nothing. You remember back up in Samaria, they wanted to, when they felt like Jesus had suffered an indignity in Samaria, they're like, Lord, let's blow this place, bring down fire on it right now. Let's burn the place up. Jesus, hold it, slow the horses. So yeah, they're the sons of thunder. They live up to their calling. So and the mother was from Galilee, so she wasn't with Jesus all the time, didn't get to hear all the teaching that Jesus had done. I mean, as Jesus talked about, first shall be last, last shall be first. Has he mentioned this before? Several times. And you just listen, back in chapter 1, like if you listen to Matthew, chapter 20, he said it, chapter 23, he's dropped it here and there. Here and there, he's dropped this saying. Yes, Brother Greg. Yeah.
And so therefore you might come out and might think of this carnal way to get certain positions. They're not thinking of the kingdom being spiritual.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard you saying that if being in the kingdom and serving in the kingdom is the true benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard brothers overseas that they have a problem where the church is primarily military, and they think the highest ranking people should probably be the elders or the deacons. They think that we need to take my earthly position, just transition into it, and it's like it doesn't work that way. Being in the kingdom, design your place.
Yep. Some brothers think because they was commanders and officers in the United States military, they was leaders in position of leadership. They should walk right into the church and be in position of leadership. What are we looking for in the church, Brother Greg? What are we looking for? Humility, and what else are we looking for? Service, serving attitude, and you have the qualification, and can you deal with the word? Especially if you're going to be an elder. Can you deal with the word? Convict the gainsayers. So can you deal with the word? These guys might be great. They are over a lot of people. See, that's what Jesus telling them. Let's go back to what Jesus said in verse 10, chapter 10. Let's go statement. Verse 42, Jesus called unto them and said unto them, ye know that they which are accounted to rule over the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and their great ones exercise authority upon them. But so shall it not be among you. So Jesus said, in the world is set up a hierarchical standpoint. You got somebody at the top. There's some people under him. Them people over some people. Then those people are over some people all the way down. So you look at any organization from the top to the very lowest person, everybody knows who they answer to. And in the world, you have some rank, you have some authority, you have some privilege and prestige. What? The more people that's under you, the higher you go, the more people that's under you. We say in the military, Brother Chris, rank has its authority and privilege. And so we all know that, although they're different, the more bars and stripes, more stripes as an enlisted, more stripes you have on your arm, higher rank you have, more bars and eagles and all those things you have on the shoulder. Then you get to the stars, you got more people under you. And so that we have that. And Jesus said, those people had position, they lorded onto them. The Jews understood that. The Jews had their little ranking. They had the Sanhedrin and had the court and had their little folks, the scribes and different folks. But who were they over? Who were they under? Well, you had the chief priests and the Jews, but then who was over them? The Romans, Caesar and the Romans. So you had Caesar down in Rome, but then there in Palestine, in that area, you had a governor. So you had Pilate, so then his army, and so had somebody over them. And so great men are looked at and thought to be great because of what? Their rank and the people that they have over them. And so that's what they look at. And so some people like Brother Chris has just said, think they come because they manage a lot of people out there. They're leaders and supervisors or have this military experience where they did that kind of stuff over a lot of people over there equals spiritual leadership in here, that they could just, like I say, just transfer that in and come in. And unfortunately, a lot of churches pick people based on that. Well, he was pretty good out there. He was a general. He was a colonel. Yeah, he ought to be able to lead God's people. And that colonel may not know nothing about the word or not have a good, he may know, but not have a good standing in the word to lead spiritually. But he was a great leader out there. He had a lot of position and rank and all that out there. But what has he done in here, Brother Bob?
Just before I go up and kind of agree that that's important materialistic, you go back to the original question and you ask, Jesus, what can you do for me? We have this desire in our heart. This is where we want to be, right next to you. That's the right side. And Jesus said, whatever you ask, they did ask. This is what we truly want. And then you said about qualification. Jesus says they did qualify. But you're going to drink the same cup. You're going to be baptized the same way. You're going to suffer faith, the same faith that I do, but not crucified. But that's not mine to give.
Yes.
Father.
That's the Father's, yeah.
So he kind of excluded the desire to carry. It could be because John loved them. He wanted them to be beside him all the time. So maybe that was more love driven than it was ambition. Yeah,
that's very true, very possible. But Jesus got to help them understand the nature. That's why he's telling them, outside, there's people have lord over you that exercise great authority and have a lot of people under them, but it's not going to be like that way with you. So then he goes on. So how's it going to be? But so shall it not be among you, but whosoever willing to be great among you shall be what? Go be your servant, go be a minister. Yes, brother, but this.
Someone coming from the outside position, because they have great position in the world. That's what we like humility. In the spiritual kingdom, the way up is down.
Yes.
And that's what person probably wouldn't understand coming from that world, trying to assume a position. It's like if you are truly ready for that position, we gonna seek you out.
Yeah.
We appreciate the desire, you need to have that, but we'll know.
Yeah.
Because of the ability and all those things.
Yeah, and so that's what Jesus said, whosoever will be chiefest shall be servant of all. So like I say, the way up is not that you show how great you are leading people. The way that shows you're a true leader and the true that you for the kingdom is what? That you're willing to come in and what? Serve and be a servant. Jesus said himself, he didn't come to be, see out there in the world, everybody in those positions, guess what? You're served. You're served. You know, you walk in the room, Brother Chris, Brother Haygood, we had those people when they showed up at the building, guess what? You open the door. If you're the first one there, guess what you got to do? You better call that building to attention because this person's coming in. He's been served and all these protocols we go through. But in the kingdom, you're going to come in, you're going to be the one that's going to be the first one to serve. You're going to be the first one to hit the ground. You're going to be the first one to get down and to show yourself a servant. Jesus said, did Jesus come to be served or to serve? Jesus said, I came to serve, and not only serve, but he came to give his life what? A ransom. Now we know ransom in the terms of kidnappers, but this ransom is different. Their ransom is a ransom that was paid for slaves to get the service of slaves or to acquire a slave. You paid this ransom price to get a slave. So Jesus saying here that the challenge is that those of you that if you wanted to serve, you're going to do that by showing your service. He that wants to be great is going to show his service and humility. And so he uses two terms here. On one sense, in one sense, he says he's servant, that's diakonos, that's servant. He uses that word. And then he uses the other word for slave, doulos. So he uses those two Greek words, diakonos and doulos. Now, in that world that they lived in, was a servant a good position? Was it a glamorous position? Servant is what? Bring, go get, fetch me, bring me this, bring me that, go get this, that. So everybody know what a servant is. What about a slave? Even worse. Slave, you didn't have control of yourself. Somebody else had control of you. You was at somebody else's beck and call. So servant and slaves didn't have any kind of position in that world. And people didn't look off. Who would consider themselves in that world at that time? Who wanted to be a servant? Who wanted to be a slave? The Romans had servants or had slaves. Some people, and even amongst the Jews, had people that were servants, but nobody wants to be a servant. Now we've sanitized it, we've polished it up, and we've written a lot of books about servant leadership and being a servant, and athletes talk about it. So now servant and being a servant is a little more glamorous in our world today. We polished it up and shined it up. And so now, yeah, I'm a servant. And even people put that, with leadership. We have this thing called servant leadership. And that's a big thing, a buzzword, military and business world. So we polished up servant. We made servant more appetizing. And yeah, people are willing to be a servant. But in that world, in that time, servant wasn't something that you want to be, or a slave. Nobody would, in their right mind, would want to be called a servant or a slave. But great.
That's why Peter resisted Jesus in John 13.
Mm-hmm.
He took that basin and he sat down and washed the disciples' feet, girded himself, because he would have taken basically the lowest form of a servant who would have been at the entry level to bring you into the home, welcome you as a guest, and washing your feet, travel. And that's why Peter said no to the Lord.
Yeah.
So, again, that misconception of the kingdom and what it means to serve and all those kind of things, service, minister, they missed it. And so they struggled with what Jesus was doing in John 13.
Yeah, and so in that world, to be a servant, somebody call you a servant, servant, you think about people that have maids but in our time, people have maids and butlers that they're servant. Now their servants are what? Paid, and some people pay their servants pretty well, and a lot of times servants live pretty good. Just a second, Wendell. We noticed when we talked about the story of the prodigal son wanted to go back home because what did he know about the people that served for his daddy? They was doing better than he was at that time. He said they got bread and to spare. So he said, I'll just go home and just try to be a servant because they doing well at my daddy's house. They got a place to stay and they got bread. They got plenty of stuff. So, hey, if I could just come be a servant, I'll be doing good. So, but servants, nobody would want to be a servant or even worse, a slave. But Jesus said, the world in his kingdom is not going to be like the world. It's not this hierarchy system that you climb up to the top and got people under you and you lord it over other people. No, in his kingdom, the highest people or the greatest people are gonna do what? They're gonna be the ones serving. They're gonna be the ones, you're not gonna look up, Greg, and see them in the ivory towers in the church. You shouldn't see the leaders sitting in the ivory towers looking down on everybody else. You should see the leaders on bended knees down here helping folks and serving and willing to be a servant and willing to put themselves on the line and willing to serve others and willing to run, to do this and to do that. This is the difference that Jesus is saying and is making. Any other window you had something? Yeah, yes. So we look at the challenge here, we're looking at what does Jesus mean here in Mark 10:38. He talks about the cup. The cup is an Old Testament symbol for both joy. He said, when he was talking to the two boys, he said, we know that to sit on the right hand throne, that's not for him to give. That's the Father's business. But Jesus said, because then they boldly said, can you drink from this cup and be baptized? And they said, we are. And Jesus looked at them painfully because he knew, y'all gonna drink for this cup. Y'all gonna drink this cup. And so the cup, overwhelming symbol of joy. Psalms 23:5. What does Psalms 23:5 say? My cup runneth over. That's joy. That's being fulfilled. So that's my cup running over. But it also, the cup also is devastating suffering, Isaiah 51:17. So either way, your cup, you get it run over with joy, or drink of this cup, meaning something that's going to be some devastating suffering. Can you drink of this cup? Baptizo in the Greek means to immerse. And so a lot of times we even use it when people say, you got a new job and like, oh man, been baptized with fire. That means you just been immersed. Or they give you a new task and they try to train you, so they throw everything at you and you just literally are covered up with this. So that means to be immersed in something, just to be, totally covered up with something. And so baptism means immersion, and the question is more about could they be over? So in this sense, Jesus is going to be overwhelmed. This is going to be a baptism because he's going to be so overwhelmed with the sorrow and the grief and the agony and all that's going to accompany what he has to do to go to the cross. So it's a bitter cup. This is not a cup. He's going to have to drink a cup that's bitter. What did he ask the Father several times when he prayed? Let what pass? This cup. So thinking metaphorically, can you drink of this cup? What's in that cup? It's some bitterness, it's some devastation, it's some pain, it's some that's in that cup. Can you drink of that cup? Can you be baptized? Can you go through this immersion of what he's going to go through? And so he knows that these disciples were going to do that. They probably thought Christ was speaking of some military conflict with the Romans. Again, they're thinking still physically, but think of the sorrow in Christ's voice when he acknowledged that they would be baptized with the same persecution. Christ knew what would happen to them. James will die at the hands of Herod Agrippa in AD 44 in Acts 12:2. James will die. John will spend his last days exiled on the Isle of Patmos, where he received the revelation and wrote. And so John will spend his last days in exile. So these brothers will go through some difficulty. They're going to have to drink of that cup, and they're going to be immersed in some critical, sorrowful, devastating situations. But why was their request not Jesus to give? Because Jesus said, it's not mine to give, but it's what? It's the Father's. The Father's the one who will choose and will give that reward to what? Whomever the Father deems. So Jesus said, I can't give you this. It's not mine to give. Maybe he was saying that he had to relinquish that privilege when he came to earth. When he came to earth, he was on earth now. So was he still in heaven, in control of anything in heaven? Jesus at the time? No, Jesus is down here on earth fulfilling this mission. So who's back up in heaven? The Father. So, but as the scripture's saying, after he completes this mission, goes to the cross, dies, and comes back. Now we know that what? He's put what? All things what? Under whose feet? under Christ's feet, even what? Until Paul would say he's put under all things under his feet, under the church. Paul would say that in Ephesians, he would say it in Colossians, made him to be preeminent, giving him all things, made him over all things. Who's gonna be the judge? Christ's gonna be the judge. So now after he's gone through it, at this point, he's on earth, completed his mission, so he's not in control of anything. That wasn't his to give him that position. It'd be the but later on, after he completes the mission, goes back to the Father. Now he's put all things, Paul says, he put all things under his feet, made him the head of the church, put him over and made him supersede, have the preeminence in all things, as the New Testament say. You know, he's the Christ, the righteous judge who come back and judge the quick and the dead. Yes.
John 17:5, Jesus said, "Now, Father, glorify thy name, that hand feet for the world." If folks please that mission, he was looking forward to being glorified, and he said the same glory that had before the world.
Okay, so there's another proof that Jesus is God, because he did have that glory with him before the world. What did he do with that glory? What did he have to do with it to come down here? He had to leave it. He had to put it down. He had to leave it. And so that's why Paul would say, let this mind be in you, because he thought it not robbery. He's still equal to God. But what did he do? He had to humble himself, even up to the death of the cross. So he was still equal to God. It was not robbery for him to be equal to God, but what? Made himself a servant, humbled himself, even to the death of the cross, put that glory down, but glorify the Father through what he would do and ascend back to heaven and then be glorified with him again. Yes.
Claims that Jehovah would not share his glory. The scripture said he would not share his glory with another. Then they said he's not God. So you ask him in John 17, Jesus said to the Father, give me the glory that I had with you before the world, which means that Christ has the same glory equal with Jehovah. If he's not God, then have we ever heard that of a prophet or a man or someone who's not God?
Yeah. So very good proof text there. Jesus did have that glory. He relinquished it, put it down so he could come down, because he had to come down here and be what? He had to be a man. He had to be one of us. So he had to come down. He had to come down and be robed in this, so that he could do this, conquer death and the grave. Then he could be robed in glory again, back with the Father. Yes, Brother Wendell. Yeah. Yeah. All power is given unto me in heaven and earth. Yeah. So after that, after the death and his resurrection, he's already what? Going back to that state, and getting ready to go back to the Father. So all power, after he complete that mission, what? The Father can give him all power. Because during those faithful hours, what did Jesus say on the cross? My God, why hast thou done what? What did God have to do for those days, for those hours? He turned his back on him. He had to turn his back on him. Because what Jesus do for us? As Hebrews said, he became what for us? He became sin. Can God look on sin? He had to turn his back. So he became sin for us so that we could be the righteousness of God. So he became sin. He that knew no sin, what? Became sin for us so that we could be the righteousness of God. So he had to turn his back. He couldn't look on him. He had to turn his back on him. And so he said, why are you forsaking me? You left me hanging out. But he had to go through that mission. The Father couldn't do nothing to save him or to stop it. He had to turn his back on him and totally let him go through that situation. But then after he resurrected, guess what? All things have been given unto me in heaven and earth, all power, glory. Now he's going back to the Father and retaining that glory with the Father. So Jesus is trying to help these guys to understand this. And so let me see, as we get ready to close here. So does this mean that the church, because of this, the worldly organization set up power structures with levels of authority starting at the top down. This is what Jesus was saying about the world. But he said, and how the Gentiles lord things over them. But this is not going to be the way among you. Jesus wasn't saying that in the church. We don't need leadership. Yes, we need people to be leaders, and we need organization in the church. But in the scriptures, we're going to lead in a different way. We're not going to lead in the way that the world leads, but we're going to lead in a different way. We're going to be servants. So Christ is also saying that being a spiritual leader in his kingdom is dramatically different from being a fleshly leader. The difference is you must be a servant. Unfortunately, in today's time, we have found a way to make the word servant glamorous. Like I say, we put it with servant leadership, and now we've made it glamorous. But people hearing Christ's voice understood exactly what he was saying, and we need to understand it well. A servant was unappreciated, received no recognition. The servant did the dirty work. Jesus continued to be revolutionary. This was still a complete reversal of the world standards. And just in case there was any confusion, he continued in Mark 10:44. And whosoever you will be the chiefest among you shall be the servant. Again, that thing that he's continuing to say, the first shall be what? Last, and the last shall be first. So if you want to be greatest, you want to be the chiefest, go be a servant. And like I say, in our world, we've glamorized it and shined it up and made people think they're servant, but in their world, nobody wants to be a servant. A servant would be one of the lowest positions. Whoever wanted to be first must be a slave, be a servant. Christ first used the word servant, diakonos, but now he made it even more clear by using the word slave or doulos. So whoever is going to be first or chief among you, you got to be a slave. Just be a slave. And so that would be an aberration. Or in Christ now, we don't see it that way. How did Paul describe himself? What book did Paul open say, I called a slave? What book did he open? He called himself a slave. That Ephesians, what? In one of the openings, he calls himself a slave. Paul calls himself a slave.
Romans is a servant. I'm not sure what the Greek word is.
Yeah, we have to see that's diakonos. Yeah, but in one of those openings, he called himself a slave of Christ. We'll find it, but yeah. So, but Paul didn't find it unusual to call himself doulos. Okay, so that's the slave. So doulos is used in Romans 1:1. So Paul calls him a slave. He's a slave of Jesus Christ. So in that term, slave would be a term that people wouldn't call themselves. But Paul said he's a slave. He belongs to somebody else. A slave's will is not their own will, it's the will of their master. So Christ is our master. So we're servants, we're slaves of the master. And so this is the point Jesus is making. Being a slave was worse than being a servant. Slave had no rights, belonged to another person. Whom are we to be a slave to? We're to be a slave to Christ. So can we handle thinking about God's slave, about being God's slave? Most of us have trouble wrapping our heads around being a slave to someone else, but this is what we're called, to be a servant and to be a slave. Christ discussed how he came to be a servant. He talked about how he came to give the greatest act of service, the sacrifice of his life. He was going to ransom his life for us. And so he was going to sacrifice himself and become a servant. All right. The ransom, he given a ransom for many. One version says a ransom for many, other says a ransom for all, but it still conveys the idea that he came to be the ransom. He paid the price for us. He was a slave, he was a servant for us. Christ is, first of all, because he rendered the greatest service, a sinless life that resulted in him sacrificing his life for our sins. And so, as we leave here tonight, what do we want to be when you want to grow up? You ought to be, you want to be a servant. You ought to want to be a servant of the Lord, a slave. You ought to be one to serve and to be a servant, because that's what our Lord did. He came to serve. He didn't come to be served, but he came to serve us. And just as Brother Gray was talking about on that night where he was with his disciples, and, you know, he robed himself and was going to get down and serve, that would have been something that they would expect of somebody of much lower position. They looked at Jesus. Jesus, you're the master. What are you doing getting down on the floor? Jesus said, if you don't let me do this, you don't have no part of me. So he was giving them example in chapter 13. Do you know what he said? Do you know what I just did for you? This is what's gonna typify you. You're gonna be great. You're gonna this is gonna be your call, not because you go out and beat everybody up, not because you're so much superior, but because of the love that you have, that you're willing to what? Do some of these lowest things, that you're willing to serve and be a servant. That's what's going to typify us. That's what's the world's going to know that you are my disciples, because of what this selfless act of love is going to be your calling card. So hope we get something from that as we think about what we want to be when we grow up spiritually. We ought to desire to be a servant and really understand and appreciate. Like I said, we've in this time, we've glamorized and made being a servant nice and cool is something we want to do. But back in that time, it wasn't seen like that. Being a servant, being a slave, and it was doing the dirty work. It was doing the stuff that nobody else wanted to do. But we do it willingly and gladly because the Lord has called us to be a servant, and so he did it himself. He came to serve us and leave us an example. We'll continue with the next part of that story with him in Jericho healing the blind man in the next lesson.